It was another day out for the boys. Hinata let Kageyama pick out the place today. Kageyama then decided he wanted to go the place that he and Hinata first met each other. It was a beautiful summer day, and the sun was high up as they were both walking towards their destination. When they got to the place, the court where they both first played against each other, they quietly sat on the fourth row of the bleachers at the side. Hinata looked over at Kageyama and the latter did the same. Hinata flashed a wide smile and Kageyama smiled back. Kageyama gazed at Hinata with wonder, reflected in his eyes how amazed and fascinated he is by Hinata, whose bright smile can rival the shine of the sun outside itself. Hinata titled his head curiously when they were silent for a while, just staring at each other. "What are you looking at?" Kageyama snapped out of his daydream when he heard Hinata talk and just shook his head slowly. "Just you." After saying that, he stood up and walked down one bleacher and held out his hand for Hinata to grab. He then again continued to stare at Hinata's eyes before the latter reached for his hand. Kageyama then wrapped his hands around Hinata's waist. He also took the hand that Hinata used to reach for him and held it up to Hinata's own cheeks while nuzzling his face into it. He also stroked Hinata's cheeks with his thumb. "Hinata, you understand that I love you, right?" Kageyama's smile was gone, and all was left of his expression was one of genuine curiosity regarding what he just asked. Kageyama's eyes was the one currently communicating everything. Hinata's lips parted, mouth open in shock while slowly saying somewhat like a whisper. But, why you haven't really said those words before?" But Kageyama expressed much more warmth in his eyes as their foreheads touched. "Well, I love you, my sunshine. And I'm saying it now." Kageyama said it with eyes fixed on Hinata's. His thumb was also brushing Hinata's bottom lip before lowering his face to press his lips to Hinata's. "Kitten. Hey, kitten. Come look what I just made in your computer." Kuroo called Kenma, who was eating in his dining room, with a wide smile while grabbing the latter's and leading him to his streaming computer. Kenma could see it. "What did you freaking do? It's nothing bad though. Just come and see." Kenma couldn't do anything, so he just went with Kuroo to his gaming room. He also couldn't resist the bright smile that was fully overcoming Kuroo's face, he was that excited. When they got to the room, Kuroo immediately let go of Kenma's hand to move it to cover his eyes before leading him in front of the computer. "Seriously?" "Yes, seriously. Now you can open them." Kenma opened his eyes immediately when the weight of Kuroo's hands on it disappeared. What met his was a house built on Minecraft. "Oh, that's cool. Did you do it yourself?" "Of course I did. You know what that is, right?" A house. "Oh, it's a mansion." "Yes, it's a house, obviously, kitten. But do you know why I am showing it to you?" No. "Why? That's the house I'll build for us in the future." "The what?" "That's our future house." Kenma couldn't utter a word after hearing what Kuroo said. "I want to spend the rest of my days with you." "Are you proposing right now?" Kenma stuttered, not knowing what to do. He felt heat surge through his body, his knees weakened, but his attention got fixed on Kuroo when the latter suddenly chuckled while looking at him. "Ah, my kitten is so adorable." He went closer to Kenma to envelop him in the tightest hug that he could give as of the moment. "Not yet. But for now, I want you to personally hear this." Kenma looked up to him. "What is it?" "I love you." And then he kissed Kenma's forehead, nose, cheeks, until he touched Kenma's chin before planting a kiss on his lips. Akaashi was just chilling in his apartment's living room while watching The Witcher on Netflix in his laptop while sitting on the couch. Not long after, he heard the doorbell ring and then the door open. He already knew who it was. It was Bokuto, of course. Although they knew each other for the longest time since they were in high school, he and Bokuto is still, somehow, dating for 2 months now. It was also funny how they started dating, because they just found each other getting possessive and that somehow led the both of them to where they are now. But although they can be considered as starting to date, you can feel that they both love each other. Nobody just did not have the courage to say those 3 words first, and really clarify what is going on between the two of them. Now back to the present, Bokuto wanted to visit Akaashi, that's why the latter wasn't surprised of his presence. Akaashi, I'm here. But Akaashi did not answer him and just continued to watch the series. He was also giggling at the sight of Geralt because he was a fan of Henry Cavill. When Bokuto noticed that Akaashi wasn't answering him, he immediately took his shoes off and went to him. Akaashi, what are you watching? But Akaashi ignored him and continued to smile widely while looking at the laptop screen. So Bokuto just cutely rolled his eyes and took Akaashi's laptop of his lap and looked at it just to see Geralt of Rivia looking really hot in the scene where he said, "Mine," to Yennefer while pertaining to Cirilla. I'm obviously a Witcher fan, am I? Ha 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 ha. Bokuto just snorted at Akaashi, who is this ugly old man? Akaashi glared at him and said, he, Mr., is Henry Cavill, playing Geralt of Rivia and he is the sexiest man in the whole world. Upon hearing it, Bokuto's eyes suddenly twitched in seriousness. He grabbed Akaashi up before sitting on the couch himself and cornering the latter inside his two thighs. Bokuto looked at Akaashi sternly. Akaashi wasn't prepared for what happened, so he wasn't able to contain himself and he blushed hard. Bokuto just continued to stare at Akaashi before grabbing his chin and locking their lips. Akaashi's eyes widened in surprise because that was the first time Bokuto ever kissed him on the lips. His eyes was beating so fast. Bokuto also said something in the middle of their kiss that made Akaashi's heart somewhat skip a beat. I love you, Akaashi Keiji. You're mine. Never forget that. Osamu watched how handsome Suna was looking in preparation for his photoshoot. The latter was working as a part-time model for some brands. Osamu's eyes was shining brightly as he was looking at the sight of his hot boyfriend. But then his expression softened remembering that Suna had to do the photoshoot with another model. That made Samu somewhat insecure. They were sitting in the dressing room when Suna's manager knocked on the door before going inside. I'm sorry for disturbing, Rintaro, the other model can't come to do the photo shoot today, do you want us to postpone it? However, Suna's answer somewhat surprised almost all of them. He shook his head and said, with a wide smile hiding his eyes. What if my handsome boyfriend does the photo shoot with me? He looked at Samu with hope and Samu saw how Suna's eyes were sparkling. The manager looked at Samu and scanned him in his sight head to foot and back. After a few minutes, the manager nodded to himself and said, well, I'm surely okay with it, but the question is, do you want to do it? Samu turned to Suna again and when he saw his boyfriend's hopeful eyes, he nodded at the manager saying, it would be my pleasure. Suna smiled brightly at Samu and he did the same. Not long after, staff were coming in to assist Samu in changing. After quite a bit of a time when the room where the photo shoot will happen was already prepared, Samu went out of the dressing room at the same time Suna went out of his. And then they started the photo shoot. Both of them were doing a lot of poses and they both enjoyed what they are doing. Some poses were fierce, others were funny and even quite embarrassing to enact, but they both knew that the photos would look great. After a lot of poses, the photographer suddenly said, okay, you in the suit, I want you standing up behind the chair where he is sitting. Grab his head and if you can, kiss him. He was commanding Suna to do that. Samu's eyes widened, because yes, he and Suna were dating but they haven't kissed yet. Suna looked at Samu and smiled to himself. In his mind, he was dying to kiss Samu's soft lips. So he immediately followed the photographer's instruction. Samu was a bit shocked but immediately kissed back. They both felt the flashes of the camera in front of them. It was a really sweet kiss before both of them pulled back. When they both pulled away, Suna smiled and whispered something that taken Samu aback and made his whole face turn red. This wasn't part of the photo shoot, by the way. I just asked the photographer to do it because I was dying to kiss you and I wanted our first kiss to be quite extraordinary and unforgettable. And he huskily chuckled in Samu's ear before winking at him. I love you. It's cool 'cause we even got professional pictures, don't we? Knowing that Sakusa was more of the cool, silent type of guys, Atsumu tried to suppress himself from expressing his little obsessions. However, aside from being cool and collected most of the time, Sakusa was also observant. Yes, Sakusa Kiyumi wasn't really the type to go to old libraries, especially ones that have books that are dusty, but seeing and hearing how excited Atsumu was in volunteering to help clean the old library for the reopening, he knew he had to bring Atsumu there. He would do anything that meant letting him see that look in Atsumu's eyes as he looks at something in wonder, or just to see Atsumu's face light up when talking about something that one he loves. When Sakusa showed to Atsumu's door today, with Atsumu not expecting him to really go with him as it was totally out of his comfort zone, Atsumu really had to force himself to contain his squells of excitement. Sakusa, on the other hand, had a proud grin under his mask. He knew in himself it was the right decision to go with you, even if it means getting out of the place he is comfortable with. Omi, where are you taking me? Sakusa said nothing as he was leading Atsumu upstairs on the top floor of the library. The very first thing he had done as soon as the two of them got inside the library was to grab Atsumu's hand and started leading him to who knows where. Don't ask questions, Sumu. Just trust me. When they both were at least 3 steps from the floor, Kiyumi made his way up the stairs first and then he stopped, turning to face Atsumu. Okay. Now close your eyes. Omi, please. Just trust me. So Atsumu just shrugged, closing his eyes while stretching his hand for Kiyumi to lead the way. He carefully led Atsumu up the final flight of stairs and walked him over into the large room, his hand over the latter's eyes. Okay. Open. Atsumu then opened his eyes and gasped. In front of him were the full collections of some of the book series of the favorite authors Atsumu always wanted to have. It filled about a whole shelf. Omi, this is. But Kiyumi stopped Atsumu from talking and instead took his hand and stepped towards him. He also took Atsumu's other hand, so now he is holding both. He squeezed it slightly, a silent signal for Atsumu to not say another word. I love you. Coming from Kiyumi's lips, those words carried the magic that all of the romance in those books can put together. The cold season was almost over, and the flowers are beginning to open up as a sign that springtime was on its way. Oikawa and Iwaizumi were on the way back home from visiting Oikawa's relatives. The two of them boarded a bus and Iwaizumi dropped the coins for their fare. Thankfully, the bus wasn't too crowded that day, so the two of them were able to find 2 seats to sit in by a window. Iwaizumi wiped the steam off the glass before letting Oikawa sit on the window seat. When they were comfortable sitting, Iwaizumi took Oikawa's hand in his thumb stroking the latter's back of the hand as they both looked at each other and smiled before turning outside to watch more passengers board the bus. When it was full, the bus moved and both of them just stayed in their place until Oikawa was feeling like he was in a daze while looking at the moving scenery. Iwaizumi saw this, so he nudged Oikawa's shoulder. Kawa. He was whispering as to not disturb the other passengers who were sleeping. Oikawa turned to him. Iwa-chan. Oikawa also whispered in a husky voice. Sleepy. Oikawa nodded. So Iwaizumi adjusted his position and raised his arm so Oikawa can move in closer to him and lay down his head on Iwa's chest to feel his warmth. When comfortable, Oikawa's eyes moved back to the window again to look at the scene outside. Then he looked up at Iwaizumi, whose eyes was still fixed on Oikawa with a little smile pulling the corner of his lips. I love you. Iwaizumi's eyes glistened as he said those words while looking straight at Oikawa, seemingly saying those words directly to his soul. Oikawa smiled knowingly before he turned his face upward to kiss Iwaizumi's jaw. Iwa-chan, Oikawa breathed, his voice was a low hum as his body was sending him off to sleep. Iwaizumi just hushed him, resting his head on the Oikawa's. Shish, it's okay. Iwaizumi whispered, I know. He smiled and Oikawa did too. Oikawa loves him too and Iwaizumi knows that. Oikawa knows that Iwa knew.